To 20 for the second 2025 F1 news and updates. There are very many F1 centric threads at which we need to pull. George Russell, I've now heard the full soundbite where he talks about Maximilian Verstappen and a very interesting quote as far as why and how he thinks Lewis left and its net impact on Mercedes. Christian Horner has responded to Adrian Newey. We need to talk about them getting booed, them being Max and Christian Horner, the balls that are red at the F175. We'll talk about Ferrari, what Lewis Hamilton thinks about driving the SF25 in real time at Fiorano, of course. So too, there's a deep dive on all the things that they have changed, and there is a lot. George Russell articulating that he thinks this is a trap game of a season for the Mercedes, the boys and girls from Brackley and Brixworth. Lewis Hamilton talking about what he needs to do to extend his career. And final topic on the docket, we'll get to one Helmut Marko chiming in on the beef, the everlasting, eternal beef between Max and Sir Lewis. Let's talk about George Russell first, because I was listening to Checkered Flag podcast just now, held at F175, and a couple different things were said. You know already that George chimed in about one Maximilian Verstappen and said that, listen, I haven't spoken to him. The interviewer said, I saw your jaw clenching last year when you were talking about Max. He's put me on my head. Somebody needs to stand up to him. If the things had been the other way around in 2021, then Michael Massey would be running for his life. You will all remember that soliloquy, that diatribe from King George Russell of Kings Lynn, Norfolk. Now, though, he's extended it right, saying that I don't ever intend to speak to Max Verstappen again. We haven't spoken in the off-season, nor do I ever intend to speak with him again. Oh, the humanity from King George Russell, the man who is the driver representative on the GPDA. Can you say conflict of interest? How can he not talk to Max Verstappen, foursome say soon to be 5-time champion, and complete his job? Non-rhetorical question as I try and figure that out. Of course he's entitled as a big man to do what he wants, but can he straddle both of those horses concurrently? Also very interesting from George. When asked, are you going to miss Lewis as he now embarks upon his new career at Scuderia Ferrari, he says, the no wants to come out of his mouth, but he holds it back. Of course he doesn't miss Sir Lewis. Now George Russell is the leader proper of that team. He's been wanting that role for the last 3 years. Indeed, in his own mind, he has been the leader of that team by dint of his performances. He's out qualifying Sir Lewis on such frequent occasion. Listen back to it. I will drop the link in the description. You can hear the and then he just stops short. I think it's a good thing for all concerned that Lewis has moved from my team, the boys and girls from Brackley and Brixworth, and gone over to Ferrari. Good for his motivation, his enthusiasm, turn over a new leaf, some may say. And of that new leaf, Scuderia Ferrari is getting rave reviews now, the SF25, and it's techie. I've been doing a bit of a deep dive myself as everybody combs through the nitty gritty of that car. Side pod geometry, completely changed. Evolution, or revolution even instead of evolution. The side view analysis shows a big difference on year. Side pod undercut evolution. It gets techie, but Gary Anderson, the legend, has said that he prefers what McLaren have done. Here's what he says. Legend Gary Anderson, who translates all things technical as far as F1 is concerned to noddy B-spec F1 minds like me. Well, the one thing that I would say is that the McLaren have, I suppose you could say, taken risks, in my opinion, with how far they've exploited the longitudinal suspension geometry, whatever that means. He continues using braking and accelerating to try to control the aero platform of the car. You know what he's on about with that. This is ground effect settings, right? And the more stable that you can keep the gap between the floor and the track, then the more downforce you can access, the more stable the car, irrespective of the physics challenge is being presented to it. Does that make sense? He continues, my biggest worry with that is that from my experience, it's one of those that is difficult to simulate as far as what McLaren have done. It's about the driver feel. It's about how the driver is affected by it all. So, therefore, I think on track, if McLaren don't have problems, then I think McLaren have taken bigger steps than Ferrari over humanity. Bigger steps. And they're working from a higher base, are they not? Surely McLaren in the MCL38 had the quickest car as at the season finale, Abu Dhabi last year, did they not? Gary Anderson continues, bookending his soliloquy thus. That said, if McLaren do have problems, then Ferrari have played it safe. I suppose you might call it that way. Listen, anybody's guess, eh? And let it be known, by the way, that constructors' favourites are still McLaren. The odds makers, the forensic accountants, still have them favourites. Why? Because it's momentum settings. And this has to count for something in Formula One, doesn't it? Benzi, stability as a superpower. Because power is nothing without control, no. This guy says, Joy, the boy who cries, needs to mature a little bit. I hear it. But I think George Russell comes in for a little bit of a bad rip. I must say. I understand why people don't like him, but he's an F1 driver. Indeed, you've heard me say this before. It would be hypocritical of me to flock to Max Verstappen's very unique style of aggressive driving, that selfishness, and dislike it in the hands of George Russell. Do you know what I mean? They're almost the same thing, twin image of each other. But again, some would say it's the hows and the whys that rub people up the wrong way as far as King George. Evening or what's going on, Liam? Listening tonight whilst I'm working on F1. Remember, mate, you need to send me a picture of that, Liam, once it's finished. We'll tweet pics when finished. Red Bull will dominate 2025, hence their silence. Go on, we'll talk to that now. It's a beautiful segue. Boogate, first and foremost. They got booed massively at the F175 event, didn't they? And they've come in for heavy criticism. There is a reason why. Of all the team principals, Christian Horner held the mic longer than anybody else on the night. Circa 3 minutes. Boo that man, therefore. Put the microphone in the hands of Liam Lawson and Max Verstappen, the true stars of the Bulls that are red, the people that everybody wants to hear from. That was their first faux pas even. David Croft, legend of Sky Sports F1, says Max Verstappen too didn't seem full of joy before skipping the interviews. Well, you know what that was about. Not to make excuses for Max, but he said already that he planned on pulling a sickie. Max Verstappen, watch any one of those documentaries, bloody Beyond, what are they called? I can't remember. Unstoppable, the book written by Mark Hughes, and The Autonomy of a Champion. Catch that on Amazon Prime, and you see at each and every single juncture that Max doesn't want to do these sponsorship things. He doesn't want to go and talk to, like, I don't even know, who do Red Bull have as sponsors? Any one of these bods that are on that car, Oracle. Why does he want to go and talk to Oracle? Max just wants to drive the car. Yeah, would it be nice if Max could have put a bit of a smile on his face? Of course, but that's not in Max's artillery, nor will it ever be. Indeed, therefore, it would be fool's gold, foolhardy even, of us of F1 fans to expect that of the 4 soon-to-be 5-time champion. What you can expect from him is to fight tooth and nail at each and every single turn for 24 races of the 2025 calendar. Here's what Horner. So Horner spoke for 3 minutes, blah, blah, blah. Attracting negative attention by not allowing Verstappen or Lawson to talk wasn't a wise move, though, says this article. Got fans talking about the subject and also shone even more of a negative spotlight on Horner. Here's the thing. I know Horner's not an angel, yeah, but I kind of like him. There's something anti-hero about Christian Horner. I like the way that he plays the camera in Drive to Survive. You recall that he told Toto Wolff, fix your fudging car. You remember that? There are a gazillion quotables from the Horner that Christians. There's another example where he said, if you really, really want something, then you'll do anything to get it. Of Toto, the boy who cried wolf. You'll recall that Christian Horner said he's more of a businessman than a racer. And therein lies his problem. And I think he's right on all counts. All of the aforementioned. Fix your fudging car. Why did you build it with 0 pods? You know what I mean? And Toto, the boy who cried wolf, has proved nothing if not a businessman as versus a racer over the past 36 months. I will confess. But I digress. Christian Horner, whilst we're speaking of the legend, he's responded. You'll recall Adrian Newey went on AMUS not long and said of Red Bull's travails of the automotive variety, understeer settings, instability at the rear, that's what they experienced in 2024, that the reason for that, he thinks, judging from a distance, was inexperience. He told them not to continue barking up this design philosophy tree, and the likes of Pierre Vacher and Enrico Balbo, notwithstanding them saying that they would be okay without Adrian Newey, that they could operate in a way that was autonomous and independent of the last airbender, that they were ignorant, stubborn, that they couldn't solve for the multitudinous problems and travails of that Red Bull iteration of car last year. Adrian Newey said it was just all down to inexperience, he thinks. Christian Horner responded thus. I haven't seen the quote, so I'm not sure, but I think these issues, as far as the car, are more deep-rooted than just last year. These are his comments during the F175 livery launch. He continued, when you really dig into the data and some of the characteristics, you start to see them much earlier than that, certainly as early as 2023. It was a matter of unraveling it to understand what were the contributing factors to having a very peaky performance curve. I think that's where the team have worked very hard to understand that and address it. So what's he talking about? A couple of things, I think. Most notable, flexi wing. So that's the first one. They didn't have budget sufficient to invest in a bloody flexi wing. That was Rob Marshall's lot and McLaren, and they mounted a title challenge in that vein because of their ability to build a flexi wing and leverage it. Red Bull did not. So too, you know that they ran out of financial resources prior to infringing on the cost cap as far as building a bloody bespoke rear wing. You know, the likes of Ferrari built one, I want to say Monaco potentially, but definitely Monza, 100,000%. Red Bull, by dint of Pierre Vacher's comments, admitted that they couldn't do it because they'd run out of budget. You can't have another asterisk on another Maximilian Verstappen championship. Again, this is the argument that we're going to have in a minute when we start talking about 2021, right? Can you blame a Max Verstappen for the ills and travails of the team for which he drives? Cost cap saga, 2021 Michael Massey. I don't think you can. Because each of those years, if you analyse the dude's performance, he wasn't half bad, right? Championship worthy, you might argue. Oh, and by the way, Lewis Hamilton has said that he's happy with the car thus far, that it's too early to say categorically and conclusively whether it's a championship winning car, but he's seeing things that are making him happier than he was ever at Mercedes over the past 36 months at least. He continues, bookending as follows. Lewis says that winning a championship with Ferrari would extend his F1 career. What he's not focused on, by the way, is winning an unprecedented 8th. He's focused on winning his first for Ferrari. It's an interesting way of terming it, right? The terms in which he's couched this thesis tells a lot about Lewis Hamilton's mentality, what he's going in to get, what's his motivation. Therefore, he sounds like a proper Scuderia Ferrari man already, doesn't he? Oh, and by the way, if we're talking about King George Russell, he said this of Mercedes W16, that whilst it's a significant change, it represents a trap game of a challenge. You know what I mean by trap game? When a favourite goes to an underdog away, as an example, and then loses. Should be an easy game, but they get caught up in a dogfight and then all of a sudden end up losing it. That's what Mercedes are dealing with in 2025. George Russell says, every year we've uncovered a problem, we've solved it, and it's created, therefore, a new one. This year, we've been a lot more disciplined, a lot more diligent with every change, just to ensure we're not going to fall into a new trap. Mercedes have been falling into them in perpetuity over the last 36 months. The inception of that problem was, of course, the zero pod. I remember seeing the zero pod for the first time on the W13, and I thought, yes, genius. Double diffuser settings. Nobody else has that on the grid. They've gone there. They've trod their own path, gone a separate way. Of course, that's going to be a championship winner. But then they didn't listen to the legends that came before them, right? Peter Wright, God tier ground effect mind, who told them listen, you want to be careful for this porpoising stuff, because he experienced it back in the day, and of course you will experience it now, because there is one truism that will never fail you in F1 history, being, of course, that history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. These Mercedes bots thought that they know better and decided to spit in the face of the minds that have come before them. Oh, the humanity. Let's talk about Helmut Marko. Stephen says, Michael totes, you guys are legends. Macon, Lewis would make a great politician. I don't hate it. He knows how to, I don't want to get too deep on Lewis being a politician, but he understands what it is to be tactful, because he understands that his commercial value is wrapped up in that, to the detriment for some. Some will look at him and say, well, he's fake. He's contrived. He's not his authentic self, but there's a reason for that, right? He understands that all of his commercial value is wrapped up in him being so PR friendly. Said it on a gazillion occasions, whilst Lewis is a truth sayer, he's also very PR friendly, has always been, apart from maybe one or two faux pas. Is it because I'm black, as your exhibit A? There's been a couple of those throughout his career, but he very rarely missteps. And again, I think he's acutely aware that he can't afford to. There's a stanza in the Marquez Unstoppable book that compares Sir Lewis's attitude to Maximilian Verstappen's. And he says of Sir Lewis that there's an insecurity built in him, even when he's walking up and down the grid as a 7-time champion. And that's by dint to the fact that he had to fight so hard to get into F1 in the first place, that it was tenuous. That but for his dad working 3 to 5 jobs at any one particular time, but for Ron Dennis's sponsorship, then Sir Lewis Hamilton as an F1 driver would never have happened. Sliding doors, settings, opportunity cost of cash, some may say. That's why you see Lewis still super PR friendly, because he knows that this can all go away. Max Verstappen, on the other hand, knows that he was always destined to be an F1 driver. His father was one. His mother was capable, had the skill to be one. This is his destiny. In Maximilian Verstappen's mind, he belongs here. He belongs on the top step of the podium, and that's a very different approach. I've said on a gazillion occasions that they're very similar as drivers, particularly Sir Lewis in his younger years when he first came in 2007. Lap 1, turn 1, Fernando Alonso, Adelaide, round the outside. It all makes sense. They're very similar, but very different in the way they hold themselves because of the different paths that they took to get into Formula One. But I digress. Final topic on the docket. Helmut Marko's chimed in, talking as per usual. I never hate a cheeky Helmut Marko quotable. He's always got something to say, right? And that just as we head into the first race, into testing week next week, I don't mind me a cheeky Helmut Marko stanza that we can dissect for and diatribe on. Here's what he said. This article reports Ferrari 2025 car, the SF25, was officially unveiled on Wednesday morning at Fiorano test circuit, with it immediately being noted that the car appeared to turn more sharply. Helmut Marko insists that more will be known if Lewis Hamilton is a threat to Max Verstappen after pre-season testing next week in Bahrain. No kidding, Charlotte. We'll know that after the tests, he says. Helmut Marko continues, when we see how good that Ferrari SF25 is. Marko continued, Max is definitely the best driver, however, the humanity. Say how you really mean it, Helmut Marko. What do you mean Max is the best driver? Well, over Lewis Hamilton? Surely not. Lewis Hamilton, 7-time champion. Well, it depends on not what side of that fence you sit, how you ingest your Formula One, and how you define greatness. If recency bias is the restaurant from which you dine, then of course it's got to be Max Verstappen. Champ settings back to back 4 consecutive. Only a few people have done that in a row. But if length of service, tenure is your thing, then you can't really, there's no beating the 7-time champ, right? Unless your name is Michael Schumacher, that makes you equal only. It's techie, this. We're going to have this argument throughout the course of this season. In fact, I feel like this is an F1 barbershop argument that we'll be having between now and the time when the cows come home. Is Sir Lewis a better driver than Max Verstappen? it depends. This is subjectivity, and this is what makes F1 such a great sporting endeavour and such a fantastic conversation. Helmut Marko thinks that Maximilian Verstappen, as at 2025, is definitely the best driver. This article continues. Whilst Hamilton has been touted as a title contender by some, others has questioned if the 40-year-old's move to Ferrari has come too late in his career. Of whom are they talking, chat? Surely it can't be me. Do you know what I mean? Age is nothing but a number. Forget about the fact that only 3 40-year-olds have ever won F1 championships ever. Only one champion has won in 3 different cars. He has a name, and his name is Juan Manuel Fangio. Forget about how statistically difficult and how steep the gradient is, that the mountain that Lewis Hamilton will have to climb to get back to silverware. Let's forget about all that stuff. Look at the pictures. Look at the halo around Lewis Hamilton's head. HBO 24/7 settings. Allow me for a second, as a Sir Lewis Hamilton fan, to disbelieve the evidence of my own eyes and ears. Am I even allowed to use scissors? Abbott of Unreason settings. For in this channel, what we will never ever do is sacrifice truth and objectivity at the altar of any cognitive dissonance, recency, bias, or partisanship. It's techie. I'm not saying that Sir Lewis Hamilton won't do it, contrary to what Lewis Hamilton fundamentalists want to hear. My crystal ball is far too murky to go out on such a stretch. However, I am saying that it is going to be difficult. The path to the 8th for Sir Lewis is beset on both sides by multitudinous travails. It's Max, it's Charles, it's age, it's history, it's statistics. It's a unprecedented 24 race championship, only the second time that we've done it. It's a Ferrari that's going to be techie. It's a team that's going to be techie. Again, lest we forget that Ferrari operationally have never been the best, super stubborn. They will make mistakes. How does he manage the dynamic with Charles Leclerc, a fire-breathing dragon of an F1 peddler, fastest point-to-point on the grid by all accounts? How do you juggle so many balls? How do you spin so many plates of the automotive pugilistic variety? Open and honest, non-rhetorical question. Not to say that Lewis Hamilton can't or won't do it, but that it will be very difficult. Incredible. One of the greatest sporting comebacks in sporting history and F1 if he does it. That's the type of thing that we're talking about, and we need to address it in those terms. Underdog settings. Helmut Marko continues. I would be cautious about Lewis Hamilton as a challenger. If Lewis Hamilton is motivated, though, he can continue where he left off in 2021. The comeback he delivered then was quite impressive. Comeback. It would be similar, right? Parallels between 2025 and 2021. Oh, the humanity. Myself, as a F1 fan, a B-spec F1 mind, I would pay loads of money. I would remortgage my house to see a rematch of 2021. Do you mean Max Verstappen versus Lewis Hamilton? What do you mean? 27 years old versus 40 years old. 7-time champion versus 4 soon to be 5. Mate, inject it into my veins now. It's going to be chaos. Here's hoping that Lewis can recover his form from 2021. But it's going to be techie, eh? It's going to be techie. As much as I'd love to drink from the Lewis Hamilton Kool-Aid fountain, I can't, because it's caveated all over the shop. You have to. You'd be an Abbott of Unreason not to. Helmut Marko continues. The Ferrari, however, has to be competitive for this to happen. Hamilton has to get his qualifying right. That was never his strength. Hang on a second, Helmut Marko. Are we going to label Helmut Marko an Abbott of Unreason? Where has this thesis come from, chat? That Lewis Hamilton was never a God-tier qualifier? That's not my lived experience. 2007, there was no out-qualifying that day. Go and watch the Silverstone qualifying, British Grand Prix qualifying that year. That dude was a force of nature. If he'd had his Weetabix that morning and put a lap together, there was no beating him. There was no out-qualifying Lewis then. So this is a story about variable change, right? What's happened year on year on year. Maybe he's lost a tenth or two, as you tend to when you get to 40 years old. Maybe it was the car last year and that he couldn't put it together. Maybe it was the techie symbiosis of this spec of tyre with this spec of ground effect car. Maybe Lewis was taking too much out from the tyres, particularly in sector 3 on his hot laps. Maybe Mercedes was sabotaging him, as so many Sir Lewis Hamilton fundamentalists, including Mama Cameron, have claimed it to be. But never good in qualifying. That's never been his strength. What are we honestly, disbelieve the evidence of your eyes and ears. What are we talking about here? Marko bookends his soliloquy as follows. If he loses 2 or 3 tenths to Leclerc in qualifying, he always has to work his way up a few starting positions. That would in turn put strain on the tyres, strain on Lewis, and strain on the relationship between modern day journalism and Sir Lewis, Carl Davidson, Hamilton. Cam wears an orange shirt under that black tee. Yeah, stop glazing Max Verstappen, you know what I mean? That driver is rubbish, Nando, isn't he? Rubbish. Brazil 2024 didn't happen, nor did 2016. 2021 entire was a sham. Max Verstappen he's a rubbish driver, isn't he? How very dare I say that he's one of the best that I've ever seen. Do you know what I mean? Nando, disbelieve your eyes and ears, the evidence that they're presenting to. Nando, by the way, chap, are you allowed to use scissors? Abbott of Unreason settings. I know you're bantering me deliberately. Macon says that would be poetic justice. 1090 to see Lewis and Max within a few points. Oh my gosh. Macon, don't tease me, mate. Do not tease me. But I think Helmut Marko makes the points. I concur with him for the most part. I take exception to the qualifying thing. That's never been Lewis's strength. What do you mean? There was no out qualifying Lewis back in the day when he'd had his Weetabix, so I will not have that. That is rubbish. But as for the rest, who are you backing to save a dying puppy in 2025 in equal machinery? Non-rhetorical question, open and honest. Sir Lewis, Carl Davidson, Hamilton, 7-time champion, GOAT settings, man from Stevenage, who had to fight and scratch and claw for every opportunity to get into F1 in the first instance, or one Maximilian Verstappen, man who was destined for a seat in F1, whose dad was an F1 driver, who went on holiday with Michael Schumacher, whose mom, but for circumstances, could have been an F1 driver too, not for want of skill or lacking in talent. Which one of those are you backing in 2025? I'll be honest. I just hope that we can see it, because that would go gangbusters. There are a lot of threads at which we can pull if indeed we want to grow the sport. I remember back in the day when it was kind of like F1 was a language that not too many people spoke. In the classroom, there was only one other boy of 24 that I could speak to about Jacques Villeneuve and how good was he. Was he as good as his dad? Legendary Gilles Villeneuve settings back in the day. I remember having these conversations, and I desperately, more than anything else in the world, don't want that to happen again. I understand that Drive to Survive has done one of these for the growth of F1, particularly in North America. We'll talk in due course about the rights in the United States. However, I don't want F1 to shrink, to become shrinking violet. I don't want it to become a beneath the table type topic again, that only a language that only a few people talk. And that means then, by extension, that I have to root for a gangbusters season in 2025. And ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury, what better way to have that gangbusters season than to run back 2021, 2-tier champion, one Sir Lewis, Carl Davidson, Hamilton, 7-time champion, man from Stevenage, versus Maximilian Verstappen, a young, hungry, fire-breathing dragon, fresh of 4 consecutive championships of the driver's variety. How do you like yourself some F1?